Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Marathwada University, Aurangabad, UGC Human Resource Development Center, online refresher course in human rights and social inclusion. I myself, Dr. Yogendra Vasundhara Pawar, going to present seminar on classification of human rights. My subtopic is classification of human rights. Very introductory, we are focusing towards the introduction of human rights. Human rights movements has progressed to a point where it is fundamental conception. It treats members of human race as members of global community and therefore broadly entitled to a common definition of human rights. Some of widely accepted definitions of human right are as follows. The United Nations Charter for Human Rights defines human rights as those rights which are inherent in our nature and without which we can't live as human beings. Second one, human rights have also been defined as moral rights of the higher order stemming from socially shared moral conceptions of the nature of human person and the conditions necessary for a life of dignity. And third one, Nichel characterized human rights as norms which are defined highly priority, universal and existing and valid independency of recognition of implementation in the custom of legal system of particular countries. The fourth one is FOFA. Human rights are not merely legal or moral abstractions, but they are embedded in historical process, closely intertwined with the ongoing anti-imperial struggle, economic, and cultural structures of international domination. From the above definition, the following characteristics of human rights become evident. There are the rights of an individual or a group of individuals. These rights are inalienable and human beings are entitled to them by birth. It assumes that it is a universal and legal concept. These rights are meant to afford human dignity and equality and to set forth liberty and fraternity to all without any kind of discrimination. Further, we may state that these rights can be executed only within the society and are protected and enforced by the authority of the state at all levels. Broadly discussed about human rights, we may discuss it into classifications that we proceed towards the classification of human rights. Human rights can be broadly classified into different perspectives. Firstly, the perspective of various aspects to human life, that is civil, social, economic, cultural, political, and moral. Secondly, from the perspective of the methods of securing them on the second basis, they are constitutional or legal. First of all, we are going to discuss about the natural rights. Natural rights are those rights which are considered to be inherent and integral to human nature. In fact, every individual by nature is given an individual property of his own which cannot be taken away by any authority. Such rights include intellectual rights, rights of the mind, and also rights of acting as an individual for his own comfort and happiness, provided they are not injurious to natural rights of others. The second right is moral rights. These rights are based on the general principles of fairness and justice. These are simply aspirations and ideas of the peoples who claim for it. Sometimes people justify these rights on the ground of the role they perform or the position they occupy in the society. Then we are going to move towards fundamental rights. There are certain rights which are more important and basic than the others. For example, rights to life is the most basic of all rights upon which the enjoyment of others' rights depends. These rights can never be restricted or taken away by any authority. That is why every society has a fundamental duty to protect it all the times. Among other basic rights are the rights to be recognized as a person before the law, the rights to equal protection under the law and freedom from illegal arrest and detention. Then we move towards the legal rights. Legal rights are otherwise known as positive rights. These rights are laid down in law. They are also guaranteed and protected by the law of the state. Thus, legal rights are uniform and open to all, irrespective of the caste, color, race, and culture. Then we discuss about the civil and political rights. The rights that are granted by government or civil society are called civil or political rights. These rights provide the base for the fulfillment of elementary conditions of the social life. Without them, civilized life is not possible, and they are therefore considered very essential for the progressive life of man. Civil and political rights, however, include the right to perform of speech, of assembly, the right to move freely, to hold property and practice trade of professional, and the right to take part in the government of one's country. Then the sixth, economic, social, and cultural rights. These are his entitlement of the individual via the state in order to eradicate social inequality, economics imbalances, and to limit disadvantages caused by nature, age, and so on. These rights, however, are bestowed by the state. The state is not bound to meet these entitlements all at once. It depends upon the economic resources of the society. Most of the socialist states recognize these rights as fundamental rights of the people: right to equality, right to work, right to have family, right to privacy, right to information, right to public assistance during old age and sickness, right to health care, right to special care during the childhood and during motherhood are some of the examples of these rights. It may say that aforesaid rights are from some of the major categorization, but such categorization are not enough in the sense that rights have a tendency to grow with the changing circumstances of the society. Certain rights like right to development, the right to know, and the right to self-determination are of recent origin. Several governments, however, as well as the news media and other agencies, have come to use the term human rights in a very narrow sense, referring only to civil and political rights set out in United Nations Declaration. As a result, the term human rights is often broadly misused in mean only civil and political rights and to exclude from consideration as a matter of rights. Fundamental issues like the right to food, health, education, and social security. The Vienna Declaration, issued after the Conference of Human Rights 14 June 1993, in which representatives of 171 countries and hundreds of non governmental organizations participated, unambiguously affirmed that the human rights are universal, individual, interdependent, and interrelated. It has also been affirmed that democracy is the role or sole guarantor of individual rights, civil, political, economic, social, cultural, and collective rights within the states and within community of states. There are three generations of human rights. We may go through the one by one. Though human rights are individual, invisible, but they are also inseparable from the major aspirations of time. It is therefore vital to foster constantly an awareness of the links uniting human rights development, peace, and many other issues. This broad vision ties in with the thinking of those who call for and urge the formulation of three generation human rights. These are the first generation of human rights are those which originated in Europe and America. In the 18th century, these rights emerged from the American Revolution in 1976 and French Revolution in 1789. They were aimed at securing the citizens' liberty from the arbitrary action by the state. These rights correspond by the large to the civil and political rights in the International Bill of Rights, such as the right to individual freedom, freedom of speech, thought, and faith, the rights to own property, and so on. These rights were meant to impose negative obligation on governments to cease from interfering with the exercise of individual liberties. These rights were among the major concerns of all liberal and democratic movements since the 19th century. Then we move towards the second generation of human rights that is emerged in the 19th century out of the political and economic struggles of the emergent working class and included political and economic demands like the right to participate in the exercise of political power, the rights to universal adult franchises, the right to fixed hours of work, the right to minimum wages, the right to form union, and so on. These rights were conceptualized and legalized in the West in course of a series of agitation and struggles corresponding to the various stages of economic growth under a capitalized system. These rights are also said to be a security oriented and it provides for social, economic and cultural security. These rights, social, economic and cultural are more positive in nature that they make it the duty of the state to ensure that these rights are realized. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights reflects the consent on the principles which form the basis of the first and second generation right. Lastly, we move towards the third generation of human rights, which is emerged in the 20th century through the social political terminal of the two. The most important example of these rights are the response to the phenomenon of global interdependence. These rights are the relatively recent origin. They have evolved in the response to various new concerns over which international consensus has emerged in recent years. These includes environmental culture and developmental rights. They are concerned with the rights of groups and peoples rather than of individuals and include such rights as the right of self-determination and the right to development, the Declaration on the Right to Development adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1986. So, for the seminar, I conclude here by yeah, giving a thanks to UGC HRDC Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, Aurangabad. Thanking you.